Black Mirror is an anthology show created by the British comedian Charlie Brooker. It's been dubbed by many a modern-day Twilight Zone, not just because of its anthology format, or the fact the stories have many of the same themes as the Twilight Zone, but also for being just as engaging and chilling in how it makes you think.
While it has had a number of bad episodes, when it's good, it knocks it out of the park.
So when I saw this video from someone called Ross McIntyre,
Presumably no relation to Michael,
I thought I'd end up agreeing with it. But I'm going to talk in this video about why I think his video has a lot of odd and very general statements that just come across as either vague, very subjective, or just so general that it's hard to even understand what he means. The opening to this video was quite good at explaining how he feels the show is a bit hit and miss, which I agree with, and how the frustration he feels is only heightened with season 5 of the show, which I don't agree with myself, but that's just me.
there is one odd statement in this opening that I want to play though.
But it can also be empty, obvious, awkward, and pointless.
I'm assuming he's referring to the episodes he's playing clips from when he says these adjectives. Metalhead was empty, Men Against Fire was obvious, Hated in the Nation was awkward, and Playtest was pointless. The latter I can at least sort of understand because nothing in Playtest after the first 20 minutes was real.
I don't agree with him. A story that takes place inside a person's mind can still be a good story. Still, at least I get what he means.
But the other three completely mystify me. Now, you might be thinking, it's an opening statement. You need to be a bit more general and vague to draw people in. He'll probably go into more detail later. Well, let's just wait and see.
Spoiler alert, he doesn't. Also, one minor nitpick about the opening.
One question kept running through my head. What makes an episode of Black Mirror good?
Why did you fill the screen with an abridged version of that question in big block capitals? He then talks about how he feels the worlds and characters need to feel authentic, which I find kind of odd considering very few of the episodes take place in the contemporary world. There is pretty much always some kind of sci-fi or fantasy element to the world, so why does the world need to feel authentic?
Because the show is always rooted in what is supposed to be relatable human conflict, it sometimes suffers by pushing the concepts and characters into the realm of disbelief.
So, because the conflicts are relatable, the concepts and characters aren't believable. Huh? How does that work?
Surely if the conflicts between characters are relatable, that at least means the characters having those conflicts are believable. The worlds in the show have always had some sort of fantasy element to them, because normally they are asking some kind of what-if question, which personally is what I love about it. In fact, now that I think about it, some of my favourite movies and TV shows centre around what-if ideas. What if you met your parents when they were your age? What if the only way you could pay for your cancer treatment was by becoming a criminal? What if an old man could still travel the world without ever leaving his house? What if you had a time machine that could go anywhere in the universe and anywhen in time? Apparently Ross doesn't feel the same way though, because he then says,
The premises of the episodes are pushed beyond the point where I find them conceivable, and the stories lose me.
while to me, the idea that the story or concept is something that probably couldn't happen is what makes them all the more fascinating. The sad truth is that stories that are 100% realistic are kind of boring. Even true story movies are often changed from reality in small ways to make things more dramatic.
I'm capable of suspending disbelief, but only so far. Basically, when I lose the feeling that these stories can ever truly be experienced, the story loses me.
Then I have to conclude that your ability to suspend disbelief is incredibly limited.
Most of the best sci-fi, fantasy or horror-based stories are things that could never really happen. Are you seriously telling me you can't enjoy any story that has any kind of fantasy or supernatural element to it? I mean, you're allowed to enjoy or not enjoy whatever you want, but I think that's more of a problem with you than with this show.
The photorealistic android, the theme park to punish a criminal for the rest of her life, and the holographic bear becoming the face of a dystopian police state do not make me question the role of technology in everyday life.
Nor should they, because that's not the aim of any of those episodes.
Be Right Back asks the question, if you could somehow recreate a deceased loved one using photos and things they've written online, would it be the same? White Bear asks if a criminal deserves to be punished forever, even when they don't remember doing what they did. And the Waldo moment explores the commercial side of politics and asks how much the public is swayed by an aesthetically pleasing persona. He then talks about the characters in the stories and asks another strange question.
If we don't care about the people experiencing these concepts, why should we care about the concepts at all?
Quite easily, if you have at least a basic understanding of the way human beings will act in any particular situation.
A lot of the time, it's much easier to immerse yourself in a situation or idea if the character in the middle of it is essentially a blank slate that we can project our persona onto. Black Mirror's stories are not driven by the characters, they are driven by the situations the characters are put in. Video games often work around the same logic. In the Half-Life and Portal games, the player's character never speaks and the whole game is played from that character's POV, creating the illusion to the player that they are playing as themselves. This makes it easy for the player to care about the situation that character is in, because it's like we are in that situation. The same is true of the character of Victoria in White Bear. By knowing so little about her and only knowing what she knows about what's happening to her, it's easy to put ourselves in her shoes and imagine ourselves in that situation she finds herself in.
The idea of an authentic world may not be the problem with these episodes, but the idea of authentic characters definitely is.
Okay, this was another statement that took me a while to process, because I'm not quite sure what he means by authentic here.
I assume he's talking again about the idea that it feels like something that could really happen, and the characters feel like real people. As I've previously explained, I don't see why the former is needed, but the latter I can certainly see the importance of. If the characters don't feel like real people, we're not going to be able to relate to them or understand their situation. But what he says after this sounds more like he has a problem with the lack of character development, and admitting that a lot of the characters are just empty vessels to be thrown into these situations. During this part, he's playing clips from Playtest, so I guess he's referring to the fact that in that episode, the character of Cooper is given a bit of character development and the hint at the start of an arc, and then a very brief end to that arc in the last minute or so of the episode, with basically no middle at all. If that's what he's saying, and let me be clear, I'm just guessing because he never actually talks about the episode himself, I kind of see the problem, but at the same time I don't really see why any kind of deep character development is needed in a story that is clearly more about the concept and the atmosphere. During this part of the video, Ross talks about how the characters are the most important thing to him, how they are the heart of the story. But given that this is an anthology show where the characters were created simply to serve a function in the specific scenario they have been placed in, I just don't know why he would think that. When I think of stories where the characters are the real driving force, I think of characters we get to know over a long period, either through many seasons, books, comics, movies, or some combination thereof.
Keep in mind, no character in Black Mirror has been in more than one episode, so we'd only have that one episode to experience their entire arc.
Now, of course, it's not impossible to create a great character story using that format, but if that had been Charlie Brooker's aim when he created the show, he wouldn't have made it anthology-based. The show has had a handful of what I would consider great characters, such as Daly, Kelly, and Chris. But Ross's idea that the characters are more important than the scenarios these characters are placed in just kind of has me wondering if he even knows what kind of show he's watching.
But I want more from a story than just, wouldn't it be crazy if this happened?
To me, that's just another way of asking what if, which I feel opens up a massive range of possibilities.
But you're saying you want more than that? What more do you need? Well, thankfully, he does sort of answer that a few seconds later.
I want to walk away from a Black Mirror episode feeling like I've gained a new perspective, the kind of perspective that I've chosen to ignore because of the convenience of modern technology. You know, like the point of the show?
Okay, so it seems at this point you're criticizing the show for things it's not only not doing, but not even trying to do, which is kind of like criticizing a phone because you can't use it to drive to work, or a car for not being useful to talk to a friend in another part of the country.
Okay, maybe that's a rather extreme example, but I still think it illustrates the point that you can't fairly criticize anything for things it's not setting out to do.
I guess you try to justify this with your "the point of the show" remark, like you feel the show is failing to serve the specific purpose it was created for. In which case, I have to ask, where are you getting this idea from that the show had a specific point? You don't give a source, but I have found a statement online where Booker talks about technology being a drug, and the title of the show refers to the black screens we are constantly staring at. However, he also talks about how the show was inspired by The Twilight Zone, which was never a show I felt like was there to serve a clear purpose other than to tell a thought-provoking and engaging story. Why should Black Mirror be any different? Also, it is pretty common for long-running TV shows to branch out into different areas or just do something different in later seasons. And this is an anthology series. It's the perfect format for exploring new areas of storytelling. He then talks about how the show feels different now and how the stories are less about sending a message and more about the interesting concepts and writing a story alongside that. I don't see what's wrong with that, but he does give an example of the potential he saw in Striking Vipers that does help me to better understand the frustration he refers to in the video's title.
When I first watched Striking Vipers, I was pretty curious how it would explore the idea of this man who has sex as a virtual woman and finds it more pleasurable than sex in real life. Questioning gender identity, sexual identity, there's layers there. Oh, wait, the episode doesn't explore that at all.
Couple of things here. Firstly, the mere fact you're talking about it in this video kind of shows that the episode does explore that on at least some level. Okay, so in terms of what it means if you enjoy sex more as a woman in the virtual world than as a man in the real world, it may not give you a definitive answer. But isn't that as it should be? For me, there is value to just presenting these ideas and opening up the chance for the viewer to make up their own mind about what it would be like to be a different gender in the virtual world, what counts as cheating, and if it makes him bisexual. I found that fascinating, but only because of the way the episode presented me with these ideas and allowed me to make up my own mind about what to think. Second, you just talked about how you wanted the show to explore the effects of modern technology on society, but now you're saying you wanted an episode to focus more on a character's sexuality and gender identity, like tons of non-sci-fi based dramas have already done? I mean, if that's what you want from this show, that's up to you, but it seems like an odd thing to want from a sci-fi show about technology. He then makes a brief minor complaint about the fact the show uses recognizable actors, because he finds it distracting. But isn't that true of anything that has a big name actor in it? Also, these recognizable actors are only recognizable because they are the best actors out there.
So, in a sense, you're criticizing the show for using good actors. I mean, would you rather they use bad actors that no one knows? Because I can tell you right now, however distracting you find the use of certain actors, that's nothing compared to how distracting bad acting is.
Also, it's not like they constantly use tons of big-name actors that everyone knows. In the 15 episodes and one interactive movie we've had in the last 3 seasons, I can only think of 7 episodes that I remember featuring any actors that I knew from something else. Only 2 of those featured more than one of those actors, and none featured more than 2.
And it's not like any of them are big superstar actors.
Alice Eve and Jesse Plemons were the only ones I knew for more than one role at the time, and would you even consider Miley Cyrus an actress? I mean, I've never watched Hannah Montana, so maybe she was really good in that.
Then he makes another puzzling complaint.
Why did they make Black Museum? Why did they mess with the anthology structure and tie everything together in this half-baked mess of ideas?
Ross, you don't remember Black Museum very well because the overall story in that episode is still self-contained.
You can watch that episode without having seen any other episodes of the show and still understand the overall story in it. There are a lot of Easter eggs which reference other episodes of the show, but firstly, Black Museum is far from the only episode of the show to do something like that. Second, and more importantly, they are not things you need to understand or even notice in order to follow the stories in the episode. Now, of course, the episode does have a slightly different format because it's an anthology episode that ties together the stories in the episode, but I wouldn't call that messing with the anthology structure, since, like I said before, the overall story in the episode is still self-contained. Also, didn't White Christmas do something similar? Why were you okay with it there, but not here?
Next, he talks about his favourite episode, which oddly enough is also the very first episode, the National Anthem.
Yes, the one where the Prime Minister has sex with a pig on live TV to save a kidnapped princess, aka the worst pitch for a Super Mario game ever.
What? Okay, obviously I know that's just a joke, but... What?
Like, is he suggesting someone pitched a Mario game where, instead of fighting Bowser at the end, Mario has sex with a pig? I don't get it. What's the joke there? At the very least, wouldn't it have made more sense to say it was the worst pitch for a Zelda game ever, since you also save a princess in that game, and the final boss is actually a pig? Hey, yeah, maybe instead of fighting Ganon, Link just showed him his other Master Sword and... What were we talking about? Which episode was this again? Right, the National Anthem.
Now, FYI, I liked this episode too, and Ross does a pretty good job of explaining why it works.
He summarises the plot of the episode and the basic areas of society that it covers. He also talks about how the viewer can put themselves in the shoes of the members of the public in this episode, and also talks about how it makes you ask questions and allows you to make up your own mind about what you might do and what is the right thing to do. The problem with this breakdown of why this episode worked is it doesn't explain why he feels later episodes fail where the national anthem succeeded. He just moves on to nitpicking minor problems or plot holes in the episode Rachel, Jack and Ashley 2.
2 teenage girls, a tiny consumer-grade robot, and a recently comatose Miley Cyrus stopped an evil music executive from selling a giant Miley Cyrus hologram. This is the show I'm supposed to take seriously.
Oh, but the Prime Minister having sex with a pig while the British public watch and laugh, that's highly sophisticated entertainment, is it?
I mean, like I said, I like that episode fine, but be honest, man, the premise is pretty dumb.
After this, he spent about 30 seconds praising the episode San Junipero.
Which seems odd to me since, without wanting to spoil anything, the premise of that episode is about as far away from anything we can relate to in real life as I think it's possible to be.
So all these episodes that he's criticised for not giving him anything that helps him relate to real life, and now the premise of San Junipero, which in his own words,
we have no way of processing,
is just great apparently. By the way, I just want to go on record that Ross is free to like the episode. In fact, I liked it as well. I'm just making the point that the things he's criticising other episodes for doesn't seem consistent with his praise for this one. This inconsistency also continues with his next point about the episode Smithereens.
In Season 5, texting and driving is bad.
Okay, firstly, if you want to phrase it like that, it's social networking and driving is bad. But there is a heck of a lot more to what that episode is saying than just that. It's about how even if social networking is addictive, we still only have ourselves to blame for allowing ourselves to be distracted by it. That maybe even the people that created these sites might hate how addictive they have become, and that they are in some ways double-edged swords depending on how you use them. It's very easy to make an episode sound however good or bad you want it to by choosing your words carefully and how much detail you go into.
He also makes a point which, as a general point, I actually agree with. That the show is a bit preachy with its messages.
But Ross seems to only have this problem with Smithereens, while to me, this problem has been around since the first episode. He then seems to move on to a closing statement, where he makes a lot of very general statements about the concepts, characters, and the endings to the episodes. But he also talks about how the show has given us one good episode for every bad one. What's interesting is the pairings he chooses.
For every black museum, there's a white Christmas.
For every episode you didn't like, just for being an anthology episode, there's another anthology episode which you liked, I guess, even though you didn't talk about it.
For every Smithereens, there's a 15 million merits.
For every episode you didn't like for being slightly preachy with its message, there's another episode you apparently liked but again didn't talk about that has an incredibly preachy message at the end.
For every Archangel, there's a Shut Up and Dance.
For every episode you didn't talk about, there's another episode you didn't talk about.
You see, the problem is, of the 6 episodes you mention here, you only really talked about one of them in the video and briefly mentioned another. So I've got no point of reference to know what you're really saying here. If all you're saying is that the show is a bit hit and miss, then I agree. But that's a rather primitive and general statement to end the video on. He also talks in his closing statement about the potential he sees in all the episodes he doesn't like, except for Metalhead. But he doesn't explain what this potential is or why he doesn't see it in Metalhead. He just immediately moves on to another point, which really just sums up the real problem I have with this video. It's filled with very general statements that don't mean a lot on their own. What this video really needed was some examples of what he was talking about. He goes into a bit of detail about Season 5's episodes, but that's about it.
A few more details and comparisons with episodes he liked would have been nice.
Maybe Brooker's production timeline has been sped up so much for Netflix that he doesn't have time to properly develop his ideas anymore.
Well, given that Season 4 dropped on December 29th, 2017, and Season 5, which only had 3 episodes, didn't drop until June 5th, 2019, almost a year and a half later, that seems unlikely. Okay, we had Bandersnatch in between, but even that was a year after Season 4. Lastly, he mentions how he wants
the real Black Mirror back.
Which just comes across to me as not wanting change. In an anthology show, no less.
It probably wasn't intended that way, but it really does feel like Ross just isn't comfortable with the show evolving or taking things in a different direction.
Before I finish, I want to reach out to any of Ross McIntyre's fans, and Ross himself if he's watching.
Ross, this is the first video of yours I've ever watched, and even though I don't really agree with what you're saying, I can tell you're an intelligent and decent guy. You're not getting angry or upset at things that are not important. You're not asking illogical questions. You're clearly willing to give the show a fair chance, and you're not trying to pass off your own opinion as some kind of unarguable fact. Seeing someone who doesn't do that is so refreshing, by the way. Despite the video's title, I don't hear much frustration in your voice. I just hear disappointment for not getting the same enjoyment out of the show that you once did. I get that.
Personally, I'm still loving this show, but I'm always fascinated to hear the other side of the coin.
It's the main reason I clicked on your video in the first place. But the lack of detail or examples of what you're talking about just leaves me puzzled as to what your real problem is. I made this video in hope you or some of your fans that understand you better than I do might be able to better explain things to me. Because right now, what you say in this video just has me scratching my head.